No one took her trauma warnings seriously until the night a special ops team walked through the front doors and proved she'd been telling the truth all along. Here's the question: how many times have you been dismissed right before you were right? Savannah Coast Medical Center hums under fluorescent light, smelling like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Dr. Claire Rowan stands alone at a supply cart, stacking chest seals and tourniquets not by policy, but by survival. Around her, laughter at the nurse's station, a resident's smug voice calling her coffee duty. Claire keeps her hands steady because that's what you do when your past is trying to shake you a bit. Stay with this story because it's not just about medicine. It's about pride, pressure, and the split-second decisions that decide who lives. If you've ever watched people doubt you, hit like, comment where you're watching from, and don't look away when the doors open. The front doors of Savannah Coast Medical Center were just glass in the morning, ordinary, and smudged with fingerprints opening for delivery guys and families clutching fast food bags, and a man arguing into his phone like the world owed him silence. Nothing about them suggested danger. Nothing about them suggested the kind of night that makes a hospital feel like a perimeter. Inside, the emergency department never truly slept. It only shifted its weight. Fluorescent lights hummed above polished floors that looked clean until you noticed the sticky sheen near triage, where soda had spilled hours ago and never quite disappeared. The air held the sharp bite of disinfectant layered over old coffee and the wet heat that drifted in every time the ambulance bay doors opened. Savannah did not do dry. Even inside the hospital, your skin remembered the outside. Dr. Claire Rowan stood by Trauma Bay 2, with a supply cart pulled close, her shoulders slightly forward as if she were bracing against wind nobody else could feel. Her hands moved with a steady patience that looked calm until you watched closely and realized there was nothing casual about it. Gauze in one drawer rolled tight, hemostatic gauze in another, placed where her fingers could grab it without searching. Chest seals stacked flat, not because someone had told her to, but because seconds mattered when plastic had to meet skin before air found its way where it didn't belong. Hospital protocol wanted everything arranged, alphabetically, inventory, scanned tidy in a way that pleased administrators who never had to touch blood. Claire stalked by priority. She stalked by what you could reach with one hand, while the other stayed on a patient's chest, pressing down to keep life from spilling out. The morning shift flowed around her like she was a fixed object. Nurses traded weekend stories at the station. A respiratory therapist walked by with a yawn and a cup of ice water. Two interns huddled near the vending machines, laughing too loud, the kind of laugh that comes from trying not to feel how scared you are of making a mistake. No one offered to help Claire restock. No one asked if she needed anything. They had stopped asking months ago after she'd made it clear that small talk slid off her like rain on glass. A voice drifted from behind her, lazy and entitled. Claire. She did not look up. Coffee's out in the lounge. Still, she kept working, sliding a tourniquet into place, flattening the strap so it wouldn't snag. The tone of the voice was familiar. It belonged to someone who had never been told no without immediately deciding it was a negotiation. She heard footsteps and then the faint creak of the trauma bay doorframe as Dr. Ethan Miles leaned into it like he was posing for an audience. He was 29, a senior resident with hair that always looked styled even after a 12-hour shift and a grin that worked on nurses who were too tired to argue. His white coat hung open and his badge swung when he moved, catching the light like a tiny medal. Claire finally turned her head. Ethan's arms were crossed. His expression sat somewhere between boredom and irritation. "I'm restocking," she said. He stared at the cart as if it offended him. "Yeah, and we're out of coffee. Ask one of the techs." "I'm asking you." Claire's hands did not pause. She slid another pack of gauze into the drawer, aligned it with the others. "I'm a physician, Ethan, not your assistant." His laugh came quick, sharp, designed to make other people join in. It echoed a little too loudly in the sterile space. "You're a physician who freezes during codes and can't handle a full load. Coffee duty sounds about right for your skill set." The words landed and hung there. Across the bay, a nurse at the station glanced up and then looked away. An intern pretended to focus on a chart. Nobody challenged him. Nobody corrected him. The silence was not neutral, it was permission. Claire closed the drawer slow and controlled and straightened. Under the fluorescence, her face looked carved out of restraint. Dark hair pulled back tight. Eyes a shade between brown and black that made it hard to tell where the iris ended. A thin scar ran along her jawline, too clean to be an accident. A pale line against skin that held a stubborn tan that did not match coastal Georgia. The scar was not a story she shared. "Is there something else you need, Dr. Miles?" she asked. Her voice stayed level. It was not meek. It was measured as if she had learned long ago that emotion could be used against you. Ethan held her gaze for a moment. He wanted her to blink first. He wanted her to crack. When she didn't, he shrugged like none of it mattered. Just the coffee. He pushed off the doorframe and walked away, the back of his coat, swinging confident that he had won something. Claire returned to the cart. Her hands resumed their work as if the exchange had been nothing more than background noise. If you watched closely, you could see the tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers pressed a fraction harder against the supplies than necessary. In daylight, she was steady. In daylight, she always looked steady. It was later alone when the tremor came back like a debt. 2 hours passed in the familiar rhythm of an ER that hadn't yet decided to become a disaster. A kid with a cut on his forehead from a skateboard fall blood dried into his eyebrows. A middle-aged dock worker with chest tightness who swore it was heartburn until the EKG said otherwise. An elderly woman wheezing through a COPD flare, hands clenched on the blanket like it was an anchor. Claire moved through it all with competence so quiet it was easy to ignore. She charted without fuss. She answered questions without warmth but without cruelty. She stepped into rooms, assessed, ordered, treated, stepped back out. She never lingered. She never joined the station jokes. She never sat in the lounge unless she had to. Dee Parker watched her from the nurse's station. Dee had been in emergency nursing for 25 years. She'd seen doctors come and go, seen the ones who thought the ER was a stepping stone, and the ones who stayed long enough to get the look in their eyes that never fully left. Dee had gray threading through her dark hair and a way of speaking that didn't waste air. She didn't trust easily, but she trusted patterns. And Claire Rowan moved like a pattern Dee had seen before, only not here. Not in Savannah, not in a civilian hospital, where the worst thing most people had witnessed was a drunk guy throwing punches in triage. Claire moved like someone who expected chaos, and more than that, like someone who had already lived in it. Around 11:30, the radio crackled from the EMS channel. Savannah Coast Medic 12. Inbound with a 24-year-old male motor vehicle collision rollover, unrestrained driver. GCS 10. Vitals stable at present but confused. ETA 4 minutes. The words slid into the department and shifted the air. Nurses straightened. A tech grabbed a gurney. Ethan appeared out of nowhere, snapping gloves on like he was stepping onto a stage. "Trauma 2. He said loudly, as if declaring it made it true. "Let's get him to CT quick. Make sure we're not missing anything." Claire's head lifted. Her posture did not change, but something sharpened behind her eyes. She pushed the cart aside and walked toward the ambulance bay. The doors burst open with the slap of humid air. Paramedics rolled in a young man with blood streaking his face from a scalp laceration. His eyes were open, but not tracking. His mouth opened and closed like he couldn't remember what words were supposed to do. BP 130/85, the lead paramedic rattled off. Heart rate 98. Sats 96 on room air. Pupils equal and reactive. Complaining of left chest pain. Ethan slid in close. "Trauma 2, he repeated, already reaching for the stethoscope around his neck like it was a badge of leadership. Wait. Claire's voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the controlled chaos like a blade through cloth. Ethan turned, irritation already forming. "Excuse me." Claire stepped closer, not touching the patient yet. Her eyes moved over him in quick, precise sweeps. Neck, chest rise, the subtle asymmetry in breathing, the way his left shoulder lifted just a little higher with each inhale, as if his body was recruiting extra muscles to do something that should have been easy. "He's compensating," she said. Ethan glanced at the monitor. He latched onto the number that made him feel safe. His SATs are 96. For now, Claire leaned in the tips of her fingers, hovering near the patient's chest without making contact, like she could feel the air itself. She listened with more than a stethoscope. She listened with experience. "Look at his accessory muscle use," she said. Decreased breath sounds on the left. Ethan's jaw tightened. He lifted the stethoscope, listened quickly, then pulled back with an expression that said he'd heard what he wanted to hear. "He's stable." Claire's eyes flicked to the patient's neck. "Trachea's drifting right." Ethan scoffed. 2 millimeters does not mean anything. Claire stared at him. Her gaze did not soften. "You have 8 minutes," she said quietly, and every person in the bay heard it. 8 minutes before that, tension pneumothorax decompensates, and he codes. The paramedic shifted his weight. A nurse stopped moving long enough to listen. The room did that thing it did in emergencies, where sound narrowed down to the few voices that mattered. Ethan's pride flared. "You want me to needle a stable patient based on a hunch?" Claire's stare stayed fixed on him, cold as a scalpel. "I want you to not kill him because you're too proud to listen." Silence. Ethan looked around, hoping to find support in the faces of the nurses, the techs, the paramedics. But what he saw was uncertainty and something else. A flicker of belief that made him feel exposed. "Fine," he said finally, voice clipped. "But if you're wrong, this goes in your file." Claire didn't blink. "I'm not wrong." Ethan snapped his attention back to the patient, grabbed the kit, and worked with a speed that was more performance than confidence. His hands were steady enough, but his eyes kept darting toward Claire as if he expected her to contradict him. Claire stood close, watching not to control him, but because she could not tolerate waiting for disaster to prove her right. "Needle in," Ethan said, as if narrating made him less nervous. When the air released, it wasn't subtle. A sharp hiss trapped pressure escaping. The patient's chest rose a little more evenly. His eyes sharpened for a split second, confusion easing into something closer to awareness. The monitor responded like it was offering proof. SATs climbed. 98. 99. A nurse exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Ethan stripped off his gloves like they were contaminated by humiliation. He did not look at Claire. He did not thank her. He walked out of the bay without a word. The older nurse who'd been at the bedside, a woman with laugh lines and hard eyes, caught Claire's gaze. "How did you see that?" Claire turned to her tablet and began updating the chart. Her voice stayed quiet. "Lucky." The nurse didn't buy it. Dee definitely didn't. From the station, Dee watched Claire's left hand as it moved across the tablet screen. Watched the tiny tremor that flashed once and then disappeared when Claire curled her fingers into a fist. Watched the way Claire's sleeve slid back just enough to show the edge of faded ink near her wrist before she tugged the fabric down again. Dee did not say anything then. Dee stored it away. Later in the supply closet on the second floor, Claire stood alone among white shelves stacked with sterile plastic and neatly labeled boxes. The closet smelled like gloves and alcohol prep pads, that sharp, clean scent that never quite felt clean. She counted chest seals on the shelf. 8. She pulled 2 more from the backstock and placed them in a row. 10. Enough for a mess. Enough for the kind of day when everything came at you at once, and all the planning in the world still felt like trying to hold back the tide with your hands. She reached for another box, and the fluorescent light above her flickered. Just once. The sound in the room shifted. The ventilation hum dropped into something deeper, rhythmic, heavy. Not a memory you thought about. A memory your body heard. Rotor wash. Grit in your teeth. A voice in her head, urgent and close. "Rowan, I need pressure on that femoral. He's fading. Stay with me. Stay with me." Claire's breath caught. Her fingers tightened on the shelf until her knuckles whitened. Her eyes fixed on the plastic packaging in front of her, as if staring hard enough could pin her to this place. This time. This clean, white closet in coastal Georgia. Not there. Not then. She forced air into her lungs, counting without moving her lips. 4 in. Hold. 4 out. Her heartbeat slowed just enough to stop climbing. The door opened behind her. "You good?" Claire turned. Dee Parker stood in the doorway, one shoulder against the frame, arms loosely crossed. Dee's gaze was sharp, not accusatory, and it landed on Claire like a clinician assessing a patient. Yeah, Claire said. Dee held the silence until it became uncomfortable. You do that a lot. Do what? Organize like you're prepping for war. Claire's expression didn't change. She reached for another box and slid it into place. I like things ready. Most people just restock what's empty. Claire looked at Dee, her eyes dark under the harsh light. I'm not most people. Dee nodded once slow. No, you're not. Her gaze flicked down quick as a heartbeat to the edge of Claire's sleeve where it had ridden up again. The faint ink. The kind of mark that meant something to people who had learned to read it. Dee didn't ask about it, not yet. She stepped back into the hall, but before she walked away, she spoke again softer. You've got a way of listening that makes me think you're hearing more than the rest of us. Claire swallowed. Her throat felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with humidity. It's just experience, she said. Dee didn't push. Dee never pushed without choosing the moment. Back downstairs, the shift kept moving, but the space around Claire felt subtly altered. Not because anyone had said anything, because something had been seen. Ethan passed her once in the hall, shoulders, stiff eyes forward. He carried his humiliation like it was someone else's fault. When a nurse asked him a question, he answered too loudly. When an intern offered to help with a procedure, he waved them off with impatience that sounded like authority but tasted like insecurity. Claire kept her distance. She had learned distance the way some people learned jokes. Early, often, for reasons that never felt like stories you told at parties. Near the end of the morning shift, Claire stepped into the physician lounge for the first time all day. The room was dim compared to the clinical glare outside, lit by a single window that looked out toward the ambulance bay. The coffee machine sat on the counter, empty, a sticky ring of old brew staining the glass pot. Ethan had gotten his coffee somewhere else. Of course he had. Claire opened a cabinet, found a packet of instant coffee, and poured it into a paper cup. She added hot water and stirred until it became something brown and bitter. She didn't drink it. She just held the cup for the warmth. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. A hospital message. A reminder about completing chart audits. Another reminder about attending a mandatory communication training. The kind of emails that assumed everyone had the same problems. Claire stared at the message and felt something in her chest tighten. Not anger, not fear. Something like exhaustion, deep and old. She returned to work. In Bay 6, an intoxicated man with a broken hand was yelling at a tech. In Bay 9, a woman in her 30s sat clutching her abdomen, eyes wide with pain, refusing to let go of the hand of the little boy beside her. In triage, the line kept forming, people with their own emergencies, their own worlds collapsing in small, private ways. Claire moved through it with the same controlled efficiency. But once, when she rounded a corner too fast, the sound of a gurney wheel hitting a seam in the floor made a sharp crack. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. A flinch. A microsecond of readiness. She stopped, forced her shoulders down, continued walking. Nobody noticed except Dee, who happened to be watching. Later, as the afternoon sun turned the outside light amber through the ambulance bay windows, Claire stood at the station charting. Kayla Henson, a newer nurse with bright eyes and a ponytail that always came loose mid-shift, approached with a cautious smile. Dr. Rowan. Claire looked up. Kayla held out a small stack of papers. Discharge instructions for the COPD patient. I just wanted to make sure these look right. Claire scanned them quickly, corrected two small things, and handed them back. Good, she said. Kayla hesitated. Her fingers tightened on the papers. Back in trauma earlier, she said. The car accident. How did you know? Claire's gaze slid back to her tablet. People show you what's wrong if you watch, she said. Kayla nodded slowly, absorbing it. She looked like she wanted to ask more, then thought better of it. As Kayla walked away, Ethan's voice drifted from behind Claire. Giving lectures now. Claire didn't turn. Ethan stepped close enough that his cologne cut through the antiseptic smell. He spoke low, as if this was private, as if he could trap her in a corner with words. You made me look stupid, he said. Claire's eyes stayed on her screen. You made you look stupid. Ethan's breath came out through his nose, sharp. Don't act like you're some kind of hero. You got lucky. Claire lifted her gaze and met his eyes. Something in her stare made Ethan's grin falter for a fraction of a second. Lucky is surviving the part you don't talk about, she said. Ethan's brow furrowed. What does that mean? Claire blinked once, slow. It means drop it. Ethan studied her face, searching for a crack he could use. There wasn't one he could see. He leaned back, letting his voice rise just enough that anyone nearby could hear without him making it obvious. You don't give orders here, Claire. Claire didn't flinch. Her voice stayed even. Then stop confusing your ego with authority. Ethan's jaw tightened. He walked away, but not before muttering something under his breath that sounded like a threat wrapped in sarcasm. Dee stepped up to the station beside Claire a moment later, pretending to check the medication log. Her voice was quiet. He's going to keep poking you. Claire's fingers moved across the tablet. Tap, tap, tap. Let him, she said. Dee glanced sideways at her. That's not how it works in here. Claire's mouth tightened. I know exactly how it works in here. Dee watched her for a beat longer, then spoke like she was choosing each word. You keep saving people, Doc. Claire's hand paused for a fraction of a second. That's the job. Dee didn't look away. And he keeps almost killing them. Claire's gaze dropped back to the screen. It's not my job to fix him. Dee's voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. It becomes your job when he hurts someone. Claire didn't answer. Her silence wasn't agreement. It wasn't refusal. It was the kind of quiet that came from carrying too many outcomes that had not gone the way you wanted. When the shift slowed just enough for people to breathe, Claire slipped into the locker room, pulled open her locker, and reached beneath her folded spare scrubs. Her fingers found the battered notebook, the leather worn smooth at the edges from use. She didn't open it. She rarely opened it at work. She didn't need to. She could see the names without looking, stacked in her mind like tags in a pocket. She slid the notebook deeper into the locker and shut the door. In the mirror above the sinks, her reflection looked like any other doctor in scrubs, hair pulled back, eyes tired. But when she lifted her gaze, she saw the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her posture never fully relaxed, like she was waiting for the world to change its mind and turn violent. She washed her hands even though they were already clean. At 6:30, just as the day shift began handing off to the evening crew, a commotion rose near triage. A man shouting, a child crying, security moving in. Claire turned her head, assessing. Not because she was curious, because her body didn't let her ignore raised voices. 2 security guards guided a man toward the exit. He fought them weakly, drunk and angry, spitting words that had no target. Claire watched until the doors closed behind him. Then she returned to her charting. When she stepped outside for a brief moment near the ambulance bay, the air hit her like a wet cloth. Evening in Savannah smelled like rain that hadn't arrived yet, and the river not far away. A siren wailed in the distance, fading toward the interstate. Claire stood under the awning and watched the parking lot, the way people moved toward their cars, with shoulders loose, laughter easy. Normal lives, with normal tiredness. She lifted her sleeve just enough to check her wrist. The faded ink peeked out dark lines softened by time. She pulled the fabric back down quickly as if the air could see it. Behind her, the hospital doors slid open and shut with quiet, mechanical indifference. The sound was nothing like rotor wash. Nothing like the thump that lived in her bones. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from the hospital system. Transfer request incoming. Community clinic. Severe metabolic derangement. Altered mental status. Possible diabetic ketoacidosis. Claire stared at the words for a beat too long. Then she turned back inside. The fluorescent hum swallowed her again as she walked toward the main desk, the taste of burned coffee lingering on her tongue, even though she had never taken a sip. The fluorescent hum swallowed her the moment she stepped back inside, and the ER folded around her like it always did, bright and indifferent. Claire moved to the main desk, logged in, pulled up the transfer note, and watched the words settle into place on the screen as if they weighed more than they should. Severe metabolic derangement. Altered mental status. Possible diabetic ketoacidosis. Across the station, someone laughed at something on a phone. A monitor beeped its patient-impatient rhythm. A paramedic rolled past, pushing an empty wheelchair, the wheels squeaking like a complaint. The ER kept breathing. Ethan Miles appeared at her shoulder without asking for space. "Clinic transfer," he said, eyes scanning the board. "I've got it." Claire did not look up from the chart. "Vitals." Ethan shrugged like details were an inconvenience. "Sugar's high. He's confused. We follow the pathway. Insulin fluids, repeat labs." Claire's fingers paused on the keyboard. The word pathway always sounded neat in someone else's mouth. A clean word. A word that belonged to a PowerPoint. She glanced at the screen again. Blood glucose over 600. Ketones positive. Anion gap wide enough to swallow a person. Bicarb low. The note from the clinic ended with a line that made her jaw tighten. "Seizing en route." Ethan had already turned away, calling out to Kayla at triage. "Hey, when they get here, put him in Bay 8. Kayla nodded quickly, eyes flicking toward Claire and then away. Dee Parker stood at the medication cart, counting vials with her lips pressed into a thin line. She did not interrupt. She just watched the way Claire's shoulders set, the way her body shifted slightly forward, as if bracing. The ambulance bay doors opened and warm air rolled in. The stretcher came through, fast pushed hard. A young man, maybe 22, strapped down skin slick with sweat. His jaw was clenched so tight the tendons stood out. His arms jerked once, then again, a seizure breaking through whatever the paramedics had given him. His eyes were half open, unfocused whites showing. The lead paramedic spoke fast, voice tight. "Name's Noah Bennett. 22. Found altered at home. Glucose reading was high on our meter. He seized twice. We gave midazolam. He's breathing but shallow." Ethan stepped in, snapping gloves on. "Okay. Bay 8. 2 large bores. Start normal saline wide open. Let's get the DKA protocol." Claire followed to the doorway, tablet in hand. Not invited, not asked. She stood just outside the room where she could see everything without becoming part of the scene. It was a habit, a way of staying close enough to catch a fall without standing in the spotlight. Noah's chest rose in short, uneven pulls. His breathing was deep but fast, the kind that came from a body trying to blow off acid. His lips were dry and cracked. His fingers flexed and curled like he was trying to grab something that was not there. Ethan worked like he was checking boxes. He spoke to the nurses with a voice that sounded sure. "Kayla Labs. BMP VBG beta hydroxybutyrate. Hang fluids. Start insulin drip once we confirm potassium." Kayla moved quickly, pulling supplies, threading the needle with the smooth practice of someone who had done this 1,000 times. The IV catheter slid in flashback of blood tape down. Noah's monitor alarms started to rise in pitch as his heart rate climbed. His blood pressure drifted down, then up again, unstable, like a tide. Ethan glanced at his phone as he spoke. "We'll recheck electrolytes in an hour." Standard. Claire's eyes went to the initial lab results as they populated. Potassium, 2.9. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her tablet. 2.9 and dropping. On the monitor, the rhythm line looked subtly wrong. Not dramatic, not yet. The T waves had flattened like a promise breaking. The QT interval stretched, a heart trying to keep time on a fraying string. Ethan did not look at the strip. He was focused on the infusion pump settings, lips moving silently as he calculated doses, then glancing at his phone again like he was anchored to it. Claire felt the familiar tightness behind her sternum, the sensation that came when you watch someone walk toward a cliff because they trusted the map more than their eyes. She told herself not to step in. It was not her case. Ethan had claimed it out loud. He was the senior resident. He had already made it clear he considered her a problem. She had been written up twice this month for overstepping for tone, for not being a team player. But Noah's heart did not care about hierarchy. The monitor alarmed again, sharper now. Noah's body jerked once, a seizure trying to spark back to life. Kayla looked up, fear flickering across her face. Ethan held up a hand. "He's fine. Keep going." Claire stepped into the room. "Stop the saline." The words landed like a slap. Ethan turned, irritation flashing. "What?" "Stop it," Claire said. Now Ethan's eyes narrowed. "I'm following the DKA pathway." Claire moved closer to the IV pole. Her gaze did not leave the monitor. The rhythm line stuttered, the early shape of disaster. His potassium is 2.9, she said. It's dropping. You're flushing him into a fatal arrhythmia. Ethan's jaw tightened. The nurses paused, hands hovering in mid-motion, waiting to see which authority would win. We don't stop fluids in DKA, Ethan said. We correct dehydration. We correct reality, Claire replied, not a flowchart. She reached up and twisted the roller clamp, closing it. The saline drip slowed, then stopped. Ethan stepped toward her, voice sharp. Do not touch my lines. Claire turned her head slightly, eyes cold. Do you want him to arrest in front of you? Or do you want him to live? For a moment, Ethan looked like he might argue, just to prove he could. Then the monitor alarmed again, the kind of alarm that made your skin crawl. Kayla swallowed hard. Dr. Miles, his rhythm looks weird. Ethan glanced at the strip for the first time. The confidence in his face faltered by a fraction. Claire spoke with the quiet urgency of someone who had seen this end badly. Get potassium chloride. Now. Secondary line. Check the dose and spike the bag. Kayla hesitated for only a beat before moving. The crash cart drawer opened. Supplies rattled. Kayla's hands found the KCL, but she looked at Ethan as if waiting for permission. Ethan stared at Claire like she had pulled a weapon. How do you know the dose that fast? Claire's fingers moved over the pump, adjusting settings without looking down, because her eyes were on the rhythm, the patient, the pattern. Because I've done this when the lights didn't work and the floor moved under me, she said, voice flat. Ethan blinked. The sentence did not fit the room. It did not fit the hospital. Claire did not explain it. She didn't have the energy to translate her past into words he could tolerate. She leaned in toward Noah, checking pupils, checking breathing, watching the seizure activity fade into a tremor and then into nothing. The potassium infusion started. The rhythm line steadied by degrees, the QT shortening like a rope pulled back from a ledge. Noah's chest rose and fell with less struggle. His eyelids fluttered. His mouth opened as if he might speak, then closed again. Not awake, but closer, pulled back from the edge. The room exhaled. Kayla looked at Claire with something like awe. That was incredible, she whispered. Claire shook her head once. That was basic medicine. Not the way you did it, Kayla said. Not that fast. Claire turned back to her tablet, typing, recording the changes, documenting, as if documentation could protect her from what Ethan would do with this later. Ethan stripped off his gloves and tossed them into the trash too hard. He did not thank her. He did not meet her eyes. He walked out of the room with his shoulders rigid, as if leaving first meant he still controlled something. Claire stayed long enough to watch Noah's vitals hold. Then she stepped out into the hall. Dee was waiting there. Dee's arms were crossed, but her face was not angry. It was thoughtful in a way that made Claire uneasy. You keep saving people, Dee said quietly. Claire kept walking. Dee walked with her matching pace. That's the job. Dee's gaze stayed on her profile. And Ethan keeps almost killing them. Claire's mouth tightened. She did not answer. They passed the nurse's station. Someone called Claire's name for a signature. She signed without breaking stride. Dee followed her into a quieter corridor near the staff lockers where the noise of the ER fell back into a muffled roar. Where did you train? Dee asked. Claire stopped, turned slightly. County. Same as everyone else. Dee's lips pressed together. That's not true, and you know it. Claire stared at her. The fluorescent light above them buzzed harsh and constant. Drop it, Dee. Dee held her gaze. I'm not trying to corner you. I'm trying to understand you. Claire felt the old instinct rise, the urge to retreat, to make distance, to let nothing touch the parts of her that were still raw. I'm a doctor, she said. Dee nodded once, slow. You can be both. Claire's expression hardened, edges sharpening into something Ethan had never seen, but Dee recognized. Not anymore, Claire said. She walked away before Dee could ask what she meant. In the locker room, Claire sat on the bench and stared at her hands. They were clean. They always looked clean in this place, washed and scrubbed and sanitized until the skin felt too tight. But she could still feel the phantom weight of blood on them, the way it had once warmed and cooled in seconds, the way it had soaked through gloves when there was no time to change them. She opened her locker and pulled out the battered notebook. Brown leather worn soft at the edges. A strap that no longer snapped cleanly because it had been opened and closed too many times in too many places. She did not open it right away. She just rested her palm on the cover and let her fingers trace the indentations where the leather had been pressed by years of carrying. Inside were names and dates and places that did not exist on any map she was allowed to mention. She did not need to look to see them. She knew every name, every face, every moment that ended with a pulse disappearing under her fingers. Claire's hand trembled once. She pulled it back and forced her breathing into a count. 4 in, hold, 4 out. When her hands stopped shaking, she slid the notebook back into her bag and stood. She left the locker room and stepped back into the river of the ER where people needed things, and nobody asked her how she was holding herself together. Noah Bennett stabilized further over the next hour. His labs improved slowly. The seizure did not return. When he finally opened his eyes fully, they were glassy and confused, but he could answer his name. Ethan returned to the bay. Once looked at the monitor, looked at the chart, then at Claire, standing near the doorway. His face was controlled, but his eyes were tight. He spoke to Kayla instead of Claire. Keep him on the drip. Repeat labs. Admit to ICU. Kayla nodded, but her eyes flicked to Claire again, silently asking questions. Claire turned away before those questions could become words. By late afternoon, the ER slowed into that uneasy lull that made people careless. The waiting room still had patients, but the acute bays held fewer criticals. Staff laughed more. The tone lightened. People believed in the illusion that the worst had passed. Claire did not believe in that illusion. She returned to the supply cart, restocking what had been used, sliding chest seals into place, checking airway kits. Her hands worked in the same steady rhythm, and it was in that rhythm that she found the only kind of calm she trusted. A tech walked by and asked where the extra IV start kits were. Claire answered without looking up. Dee passed once, paused, watched Claire's hands, then moved on. Kayla approached again, quieter this time. Dr. Rowan, the patient in Bay 2, the rollover guy, his brother's here. Claire glanced up. Brother. Kayla nodded. He's asking for the doctor who caught the chest thing. Claire felt her stomach tighten. Families wanted gratitude. Gratitude turned into questions. Questions turned into attention. Tell him the team's taking care of his brother, Claire said. He can speak to the attending. Kayla hesitated. He keeps saying it was you. Claire's eyes flicked toward the hallway near the patient rooms. She could already picture the scene. A worried family member, eyes searching, voice loud enough to pull staff attention. No, she said quietly. Tell him it was a team effort. Kayla nodded, but her expression said she understood the shape of what Claire was doing, even if she didn't understand why. Claire turned back to her cart. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. The sound was steady, measured, not rushed. Someone who knew how to move without making noise, even in a place full of noise. Someone whose posture said discipline more than anxiety. She looked up and saw him at the end of the corridor. Mid-30s, or maybe older, it was hard to tell. Fit in a way that wasn't gym showy, more functional, like strength that came from carrying weight for long distances. Close-cut hair grown out just enough to lose its sharpness. Skin tanned not from a beach but from sun you didn't choose. His hands were clasped in front of him, knuckles scarred in a way that made Claire's pulse tick faster. He was looking at her like he already knew. Claire's grip tightened on the cart handle. He walked closer, stopping about 3 feet away, a distance that was respectful but not timid. You saved my brother, he said. Claire's face stayed neutral, professional, safe. He's stable, she replied. Surgery will see him upstairs. You should be able to visit after. She turned slightly, intending to step away. Reeves. The name hit her like a physical thing. Not Dr. Rowan, not Claire. Reeves, a name that was not hers in this life. A name she had worn in a place where names mattered less than roles and speed, and whether you came home at all. Her body froze. For a moment, the ER around her blurred into background noise. She turned slowly. The man's eyes had sharpened. Not friendly. Not hostile. Certain. I think you have me confused with someone else, Claire said. He shook his head once. Not dramatic. Just final. No, ma'am, I don't. Claire felt heat rise under her skin. She kept her voice calm by force. Who are you? Luke Carver, he said. SFC, retired now. The words came out of him like they were still part of him, still attached to his bones. Claire did not react. Not visibly. Carver leaned in a fraction, voice dropping so it would not carry. Jalalabad, 2016. You ran a mass casualty after an IED outside the wire. You were the only woman on the team. Claire's throat tightened. You're mistaken, she said. Carver's gaze did not move from her face. I watched you put a chest tube in a guy with no pulse. Bought him enough time for the surgeon to crack his chest in the bird. He lived. Because of you. Claire's fingers curled around the cart handle until the plastic creaked. That wasn't me, she said. Carver's mouth tightened. It was. You didn't flinch when the mortars started. You kept your hands steady, like the world wasn't ending. The hallway felt smaller, the light too bright, the hum too loud. Claire could feel eyes on them now. Not because anyone had heard the words, because people sensed the tension the way the air in a corridor changes when something real is happening. Dee stood at the nurse's station, pretending to scan a chart. Kayla had paused near a doorway, clipboard held too still. An orderly slowed his steps, gaze flicking toward Claire and then away. Claire forced her breath down into her lungs. I'm a civilian physician, she said evenly. You have the wrong person. Carver's eyes softened for half a second, not in pity, but in recognition. Like he knew what denial cost, and still asked anyway. You're Doc Reeves, he said. And you saved my life too. You just don't remember. Claire met his gaze for the first time, fully. In his eyes, she saw it. The memory, the certainty, the kind of gratitude that could become a weapon without meaning to. She did not deny it again. She did not confirm it. She turned and walked away. She kept her pace steady, not running, even though every instinct in her body screamed to disappear. Behind her, she heard Carver speak quieter now to someone else. That's her. I'm sure of it. Claire did not look back. She went into the medication room and shut the door. For a moment, she stood with her palms pressed against the counter head, bowed as if she could anchor herself to the solid surface. The smell of alcohol wipes and plastic syringes filled her nose. Clean. Safe. Not enough. Her hands trembled. She curled them into fists until the tremor stopped. When she opened the door again, the ER looked the same. But it wasn't. Whispers move fast in hospitals. Faster than pathogens. Faster than truth. By the time Claire walked back to the main station, she could feel it in the way conversations paused when she passed. In the way someone's eyes tracked her and then snapped away. Dee's gaze followed her, unreadable. Kayla looked conflicted, as if she wanted to protect Claire from something and did not know how. Ethan was at the computer terminal typing with more force than necessary. When he saw Claire, his eyes narrowed. A few minutes later, two interns leaned close to each other near the coffee machine phones, out screens bright. They were searching. By the end of the hour, someone had tried to pull up Claire Rowan's background. Medical school residency license. Everything a hospital usually knows about you. They found the basics. Georgia license, board certification, employment records, but nothing else. No interviews, no publications, no social media presence, no photos beyond the one on her badge. In a world where people documented their breakfasts, Claire's absence looked deliberate, and the absence became its own kind of confirmation. The nurse's station buzzed with low talk. Special ops, someone murmured. That's why she moves like that, another voice said. No wonder she doesn't talk to anyone. Claire heard enough to know it was spreading. She kept her face flat, her posture calm, her hands busy. She checked a medication order, signed a chart, reviewed a CT result. She did not give the whispers anything to latch onto. She had learned long ago that attention was not always admiration. Sometimes it was a target. Ethan cornered her near the medication drawers. He waited until there were no nurses within immediate earshot, until the corridor behind them looked empty. He stepped into her space like he owned it. Is it true? He asked. Claire slid saline flushes into her pocket. Alcohol pads. A pen light. She kept her movements smooth. Is what true? Don't do that, Ethan said. Were you special forces? Claire closed the drawer a little harder than necessary. The sound snapped in the small room. I'm a civilian physician. That's not an answer. It is the only answer you're getting. Ethan leaned closer. His voice dropped, but it trembled with something like excitement and anger tangled together. You made me look stupid twice today. And now some guy is walking around saying you worked in Afghanistan. "What the hell are you?" Claire turned to face him. Up close, Ethan could see what most people missed. The exhaustion behind her eyes, the tight control, the way her calm was not a personality trait, but a decision she made every second. "I'm someone who wants to be left alone," she said. "Why?" "Because I left that life behind," Claire replied, and her voice went quieter. "I'm not that person anymore." Ethan studied her, searching for the weakness he could use. He found something else instead. "Then why do you still move like her?" The question landed like a blow. Claire stared at him. For a moment, the mask she wore slipped just enough for the pain underneath to show. "Because she won't let me go," Claire said, and the last word cracked. Ethan's expression flickered. Confusion, then something close to fear, as if he had finally touched something real and did not know how to handle it. Claire stepped past him. "Don't dig," she said, and her voice sharpened again into steel. "Don't ask. Don't make me into something you can't understand." Ethan turned to follow. "I'm not afraid of your past." Claire stopped in the corridor and looked back at him. "You should be," she said. She walked away before he could answer. In the locker room, she sat again on the bench bag, open beside her. The battered notebook was there, the leather catching the overhead light in dull patches. She stared at it without touching it. Dee appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" Dee asked. Claire did not look up. "Fine." Dee came in anyway, slow, respectful, and sat on the bench a few feet away, leaving space like she understood that crowding someone could turn them feral. "That man out there," Dee said quietly. "He recognized you." Claire's hands curled into fists on her knees. "He's mistaken," Claire said. Dee let the silence stretch until it had weight. "My brother came back from Iraq." "Different," Dee said. "Took him years to talk about it. Took him longer to stop flinching at loud noises. He tried to pretend he was normal. That pretending almost killed him." Claire's throat tightened. "I'm not your brother." Dee nodded. "I know, but you're carrying something heavy, and it's eating you alive." Claire swallowed hard. She could taste bile and old coffee and the metallic edge of memory. "I'm going home," she said. Dee watched her. The look in Dee's eyes was not pity. It was something closer to respect. "You can go home," Dee said. "But you can't outrun what's already inside you." Claire stood, grabbed her bag, and slung it over her shoulder. The notebook bumped against her hip, solid and unforgiving. She walked out of the locker room, back into the ER's light. Outside the ambulance bay windows, the sky had shifted into late evening, a bruised gray over Savannah. The air looked heavy with humidity and the promise of rain. Claire stepped to the nurse's station to sign off a chart, keeping her focus narrow, forcing her mind into the present. Then the sound came. Not inside the hospital. Outside, first distant and building. Sirens. One. Then another. Then more overlapping, rising into a single urgent howl that cut through the ER's steady hum like a blade. The charge nurse's head snapped up. A paramedic at triage froze mid-sentence. Dee's gaze lifted sharp. The radio crackled. "Savannah Coast, this is Medic 7. We have a mass casualty incident. Construction crane collapse near the Riverwalk. Multiple critical traumas inbound. 9 patients confirmed, possibly more. ETA 3 minutes. The radio went quiet after the last syllable, as if the device itself understood what those words meant. Mass casualty. Crane collapse. 9 confirmed. Possibly more. 3 minutes. In an ER, 3 minutes is enough time to either build a system or break one. The charge nurse's face drained of color. Her hand hovered over the phone like it weighed 100 pounds. Someone at triage whispered, "Oh my God," and then swallowed it like it was poison. Ethan Miles appeared in the hallway with his white coat half-buttoned, a paper cup of coffee in his hand, the steam curling up like the last calm thing in the building. "How many?" he asked. 9 confirmed, the charge nurse said. "Maybe more." Ethan's eyes flicked toward the board, then toward the hallway like he could see the future if he stared hard enough. "We don't have capacity for 9 criticals." "Then we make capacity," Claire said. Her voice cut through the rising panic, not loud, not dramatic, simply certain. It made heads turn. It made hands move. It made oxygen return to the room. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You don't give orders here." Claire did not slow down as she stepped toward the trauma bays. "Someone has to." She reached the first bay and looked through the glass. A middle-aged man with chest pain sat upright on the bed, clutching his gown and arguing with the nurse about being hungry. 2 rooms down, a teenage girl with a sprained ankle scrolled her phone, bored and annoyed. Across the hall, an elderly woman with pneumonia slept with her mouth open, oxygen cannula, hissing softly. Claire moved without hesitation. Move all non-critical patients to the interior hallway. Now, she said, if they can talk, they can walk. If they can walk, they can wait. The charge nurse blinked, startled by the blunt clarity. Dr. Rowan, we have policy for evacuations and crowding. Claire looked at her eyes flat. This is policy now. The charge nurse's mouth opened. Then she closed it and lifted the phone, fingers finally moving. Claire's hands were already tying her hair back. She pulled it tight, the same way she did before a procedure, before a trauma, before anything that required her to be faster than fear. She snapped gloves on while walking. D. I need Bay 1 and Bay 2 cleared and staged for reds, Claire said. Airway cart in Bay 1, blood cooler to the doorway. D. Parker did not hesitate. Her eyes sharpened her posture, shifting the way it did when a veteran nurse stopped being a person and became a system. Kayla Claire called, spotting the young nurse near triage. 2 large-bore IVs in every trauma bay. 18-gauge minimum. If you can't get it, call me before you waste time. Kayla's eyes widened, then she nodded hard. Yes, doctor. Respiratory, Claire called toward the hallway. I need you at Bay 1 for airway. Bring your gear. A respiratory therapist raised a hand and moved. Someone shouted for extra hands. Someone else asked where the crash cart was. The ER began to turn, pivoting from routine to war footing in seconds. Ethan followed Claire, coffee still in hand, like he could not let go of the illusion that he was in control. Claire stopped at the blood bank phone, pressed the line, and spoke before anyone could talk her out of it. This is Dr. Rowan in the ER. Activate massive transfusion protocol. I need uncross-matched O-negative staged now. 4 units per trauma bay. Keep sending until I tell you to stop. The voice on the other end started to ask questions, but Claire did not wait. She hung up and moved. Ethan stepped in front of her. You can't just activate MTP like that. Claire's eyes did not leave his. I can, and I did. His nostrils flared. You're not the attending. Claire leaned in just enough for him to feel it, not threatening, not theatrical, simply present. Then stop acting like you are, she said, and walked around him. For a second, Ethan looked like he might grab her arm. Then he saw Dee moving with purpose, saw Kayla sprinting with IV kits, saw the charge nurse barking into the phone, saw 2 techs dragging a portable monitor into Bay 2. He saw the room, and he realized the room had already chosen who it was listening to. The ambulance bay doors slammed open. Chaos flooded in. The first thing that hit them was the smell. Diesel and blood and wet concrete dust. The kind of dust that stuck to your tongue and made your throat feel like sandpaper. Then the sound, paramedics shouting over each other, gurney wheels screaming on tile radios, crackling patients crying, one voice praying loud enough to drown out pain. The first stretcher rolled in with a man strapped down, face, gray eyes rolling back. His pelvis was wrapped in a makeshift binder made of a sheet and tape, but the blood soaking through told the real story. 42-year-old male paramedic shouted. Crane beam pinned him. Crushed pelvis. BP 70 palp. GCS 8. Trauma 1. Ethan barked automatically, stepping forward. Claire moved with him, but her eyes were on the patient, not the label. Get him to Bay 1, Claire said. Airway ready. Blood on the doorway. Dee and the techs peeled off to guide the stretcher. Kayla was already there, hands gloved, tourniquet hanging from her pocket like a warning. The second patient came in right behind a woman in her 30s, lower leg bent at an angle nobody wanted to see. Bone gleamed white through torn skin. She was screaming and trying to sit up. Open tib fib stable vitals, paramedics shouted. Severe pain. Bay 2D called without waiting, yellow. A third stretcher hit the threshold, and nobody called it fast enough. The paramedic pushing it looked frantic, eyes flicking around like he could not find somewhere safe to put his problem. Claire stepped into the path. Trauma Bay 3, she said, and her voice snapped the room into order. The patient was a young man, mid-20s, chest rising, uneven lips, turning blue at the edges, jugular veins standing up like ropes. His hands clawed at the straps on the stretcher. Chest trauma paramedic said, pinned briefly under debris, breathing worse. We couldn't get a good seal on the wound, no obvious external bleed. Claire scanned him in 2 seconds. His skin was cool. His eyes were wide with panic. The left side of his chest barely moved. The sound of his breath had a thin, trapped quality. Get me a 14-gauge needle and a chest tube kit, Claire said. A nurse hesitated at the supply cart, eyes flashing toward Ethan, as if asking which doctor to obey. Ethan's mouth opened. Claire's gaze cut to the nurse like a command. He'll be dead before you finish the sentence, she said. Move. The nurse moved. Claire's hands found the landmarks by touch through sweat and grime. Second, intercostal space. Mid-clavicular line. She did not announce it. She did not ask permission. She placed her fingers, felt the ribs counted, and drove the needle in smooth and fast. The hiss of air was immediate. The patient's chest rose higher. His lips colored back by degrees. His eyes, still panicked, focused for a half-second on Claire's face like she was a lifeline. Chest tube, Claire said. The kit was in her hands. Scalpel. A quick incision. Her finger slipped in with blunt dissection, finding space between muscles, feeling for pleura. The moment it gave the familiar release, she guided the tube in, clamped, threaded, secured. Dark blood poured into the collection chamber fast. Too fast. 800 milliliters in under a minute, Claire said. Hang 2 units now. Type and cross for 6 more. Page surgery. The room around her moved, because she moved. A tech ran for blood. Kayla shouted for the lab. Dee was already on the phone to surgery, voice tight and clear. In Bay 1, the crushed pelvis patient started to spiral. Claire heard it in the pitch of the monitor, alarms, before anyone said a word. She stepped away from Bay 3, leaving the chest tube site taped and secured, and moved into Bay 1, like she was pulled by gravity. The man's blood pressure was dropping through the floor. His skin had that waxy sheen that meant his body was giving up the fight in inches. Dee was at the foot of the bed. Airway's tough, she said. He's clenching. He's vomiting. Respiratory was trying to suction. Ethan stood at the head of the bed, laryngoscope in hand, face tense. Claire looked at Ethan's hands. They were shaking. Not dramatically, just enough. Ethan saw her looking and stiffened, trying to will steadiness into his fingers. I've got it, he said. Claire watched the patient's oxygen drop. 92, 88, 84. She stepped in. Move, she said. Ethan's eyes flashed. I can intubate. Claire's voice stayed calm. Then do it without killing him. She took the laryngoscope with no ceremony, the way you take a tool from someone who is about to drop it. She positioned lifted saw cords, tube in. Confirmed placement. Secured. 30 seconds. Respiratory attached, the bag valve, mask ventilated, and the oxygen began to climb. Blood arrived at the doorway in a cooler. A tech cracked it open, hands fumbling with the latch. Claire's voice cut through. 2 units now. Pressure bag. Pelvic binder tighter. Get a fast exam. The ultrasound machine rolled in. Dee placed the probe on the man's abdomen, and the screen bloomed with dark. Free fluid, Dee said. Claire nodded once. Surgery now. We're buying time. Ethan hovered at the side of the bed, like someone who had been pushed out of his own story. He tried to speak. We should get CT, he said weakly. Claire looked at him. You want pictures or you want a pulse? Ethan swallowed. His jaw clenched. The next patient wave hit like a second impact. Another gurney. Another. People lined up in the corridor because there were not enough hands to pull them in fast enough. A teenager with blood in his hair and eyes wide with shock, repeating, Where's my mom? Where's my mom? Like the words could bring her back. An older man with his arm bent, wrong skin split bone hidden under swelling pain, turning his face into something feral. A woman with a head injury, vomiting, pupils uneven, trying to sit up as if she could outrun her brain swelling. Claire moved between bays, not sprinting, not frantic, just fast enough to stay ahead of collapse. She pointed, and people moved. She spoke, and the ER obeyed. Dee became her anchor, taking commands and translating them into nursing reality. Kayla ran IVs until her fingers cramped, sweat darkening the collar of her scrubs. The charge nurse shouted bed status into the phone, voice hoarse. Ethan tried to insert himself where he could, but the room no longer fed him attention. It fed him tasks. Claire used him anyway because bodies needed hands. Ethan Bay 2 reduced that fracture and splint it. Pain control. Keep her stable. Ethan blinked. You want me to do ortho? Claire's eyes did not move. I want you to do whatever keeps her alive and out of our red bays. Ethan's mouth tightened, but he moved. He reached for morphine, then hesitated with the dose. Kayla glanced at the syringe and her eyes widened. Dr. Miles, that looks like too much. Ethan bristled. It's fine. Claire appeared at his shoulder like a shadow. That's 10 times the dose, she said, and her voice stayed flat, almost bored. Fix it. Ethan's face reddened. His hands trembled harder now. He drew up a new dose, smaller, correct. Kayla exhaled quietly, a breath of relief she tried to hide. On the corridor floor, wrappers and gauze and torn clothing began to pile up like evidence. The ER smelled like blood metal sweat and concrete dust. The fluorescent lights did not change, did not flicker, indifferent to the human disaster under them. At one point, a resident froze during an airway attempt on a head trauma patient. The patient's jaw was tight, blood in the mouth, oxygen dropping. The resident's eyes were wide, hands locked, brain trying to compute while the clock kept moving. Claire stepped in, lifted the resident's hands away gently but firmly. Look at me, she said. The resident's eyes snapped to hers. Breathe. Now do what I say. Suction. Jaw thrust. Blade in. Lift. Tube. The resident moved like someone waking up from a nightmare. The tube slid in. The monitor climbed. The patient's chest rose and fell again with assisted breaths. Claire stepped back out of the way, as if she had never entered. In Bay 4, a patient coded. The alarm changed shrill and urgent. A nurse shouted, no pulse. For a fraction of a second, the room teetered. People looked to Ethan out of habit. Claire was already there. Start compressions, she said. Hard and fast. Epi 1 milligram. Charge to 200. A tech climbed onto the bed frame. Hands locked compressions deep, sweat dripping off their forehead onto the patient's chest. Someone pushed the crash cart closer. Defibrillator pads slapped onto skin. Ethan hovered at the doorway. His mouth opened. Claire did not look at him. Pulse check, she said. No pulse. Shock. The defibrillator whined, then snapped. The patient's body jerked. Back on compressions, Claire said. Do not slow. The room obeyed. It was not because Claire was loud. It was because she sounded like the only person in the building who believed this could still turn around. Another round. Another pulse check. This time a flutter on the monitor. A weak, carotid pulse under fingers. We have a rhythm, Dee said, voice tight. Claire exhaled once controlled. Good, now keep it. Fluids, pressors. Call ICU. The patient's eyes stayed closed. The monitor beeped a steady rhythm, fragile but real. Around them, the ER kept moving because it had to. Hours felt like minutes, minutes felt like seconds. At some point, the last stretcher rolled out of the ambulance bay and into a room. At some point, surgery took the pelvic crush patient upstairs, blood hanging from an IV pole like a lifeline. At some point, the chest trauma patient with the hemothorax was wheeled toward the elevator, with a surgery resident running beside the bed, one hand pressed on the tube site, the other holding a chart. And then abruptly the waves stopped. The ER did not become quiet. It became different. The kind of after noise that comes when the storm has passed, but the air is still charged. Staff leaned against walls, chests rising and falling hard. A nurse sat on the floor for a moment, back against a cabinet, eyes closed, breathing like they had been underwater. A tech rinsed blood off their forearms at the sink with shaking hands. The floor looked like a war zone. Gauze wrappers, empty saline bags, torn clothing, streaks of blood that had been wiped once and then smeared into wider stains by shoes. Claire stood at the sink in the trauma hallway, scrubbing her hands and forearms with soap that smelled like chemicals and nothing else. The water ran pink, then clear, then pink again as it washed over places she had missed. Her face stayed blank, controlled, as if expression was a luxury. Her hands shook. She gripped the edge of the sink and forced her breathing into a count. 4 in, hold, 4 out. The tremor eased but did not disappear. Behind her, footsteps approached. Where the hell did you learn to do that? Claire did not turn immediately. She rinsed, shut off the water, and reached for paper towels. Ethan stood a few feet behind her, arms, crossed face, caught between disbelief and suspicion. His hair was damp with sweat. There was a smear of blood on the sleeve of his white coat that he had not noticed. Medical school, Claire said quietly. Ethan stared at her like she had insulted him. You moved like military, he said. Like someone who's done this under fire. Claire dried her hands carefully, folding the paper towel and tossing it into the bin. I'm just a doctor, Ethan. He took a step closer. No, you're not. Claire turned then slowly, and the coldness in her eyes made Ethan stop short. Drop it, she said. Ethan's jaw flexed. I'm trying to understand. Claire's voice lowered. You're trying to own the story so you can put me back in a box that makes you comfortable. Ethan's face flushed. That's not what I'm doing. Claire held his gaze. Then stopped digging. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since she had met him, he looked unsure of what to say next. Dee appeared at the end of the hallway, taking in the scene with one glance. That was the most impressive thing I've ever seen, she said to Claire. Not loudly, not as praise, just as fact. Claire shook her head once. It was triage. Dee's eyes narrowed slightly. That was not triage. That was command. Claire's shoulders tightened. Don't. Dee nodded once, slow, and did not push. But her eyes said she had already filed it away. Kayla approached from the bays, hair loose, now face streaked with sweat. She held a clipboard and her hands were still shaking. Dr. Rowan, she said, and her voice cracked slightly. The woman in Bay 2 is asking for you. She says the doctor with the calm eyes told her she'd see her kids again. Claire stared at Kayla for a beat. What's her status? Stable. Ortho set the fracture. Pain controlled. She's crying, but she's stable. Claire nodded once. Tell her I'm glad she's stable. Kayla hesitated. She wants to thank you. Claire's throat tightened. Tell her to thank the team. Kayla nodded, but she looked at Claire like she wanted to say something else. The ER began the ugly work of recovery. Cleaning, restocking, documenting, calling families, coordinating transfers. The parts nobody made movies about. Claire walked back into Bay 3 to check the chest tube patient before transport. The chamber had slowed the blood, now a steady trickle. The patient's color was better. His eyes tracked her when she stepped close. He tried to speak, voice thick. Am I going to die? Claire leaned in slightly. Not today, she said. His eyes filled not with fear this time, but with something else. Relief, gratitude, a strange disbelief that he had survived. Claire turned away before that gratitude could land on her like weight. In the corridor near the waiting room, she saw him. Luke Carver stood with his back, straight hands clasped in front of him, the same posture as earlier. But now his face looked different. Less uncertain. More certain. Like watching Claire in motion had stripped away his last doubt. He was not alone. 2 people stood near him, a woman in scrubs and a man in a work uniform, both watching Claire with cautious curiosity as if Carver had told them something and they were trying to decide whether to believe it. Claire's chest tightened. Carver stepped forward, stopping 3 feet away again, respectful distance. You just did it again, he said quietly. Claire kept her expression neutral. Did what again? Carver's eyes flicked toward the trauma bays, toward the chaos-stained hallway, toward staff still moving like they were half in shock. That thing, he said. That calm, that speed. You don't learn that here. Claire's jaw tightened. You should go check on your brother, she said. Carver nodded once. I will. He's asking who saved him. Claire's stomach clenched. Tell him the team did, she said. Carver's mouth tightened. He won't accept that. Claire looked past him, searching for a path around. She did not want this conversation. Not here. Not with eyes around them like magnets. Carver lowered his voice. Doc Reeves. The name hit the hallway like a live wire. Not everyone heard the words clearly, but people heard the tone. They heard the way Carver said it like it belonged to a world outside this hospital. Heads turned. Conversations paused. A nurse near the station pretended to adjust a monitor, but watched from the corner of her eye. A resident slowed his steps, gaze flicking between Carver and Claire, and psh. Claire's hands curled into fists at her sides. "That is not my name," she said. Carver did not flinch. "It was then. It is now. You can change your badge, but you can't erase what you are." Claire stepped closer, just enough that Carver could see the strain under her control. "You need to stop," she said. Carver's eyes softened, and for the first time, he looked like he understood the cost of what he was doing, even if he could not stop himself. "I'm not trying to hurt you," he said. "I'm trying to make sure they know. You keep saving people, and they keep treating you like you're disposable." Claire's breath came shallow for a moment. She forced it down. "I don't need anyone to know," she said. Carver's gaze held hers. "You deserve to be seen." Claire felt something inside her twist sharp and hot. Seen meant questioned. Seen meant remembered. Seen meant the past had hands again. She turned without answering and walked away. She did not run. She kept her pace steady. She kept her face blank. But her heart was punching hard against her ribs, like it was trying to break out. Behind her, Carver spoke to the people near him, voice quiet but clear enough to spread. "That's her," he said. "I'm sure of it." The whisper moved through the ER the way smoke moves through cracks. You could not stop it. You could only watch it fill the space. Claire went into the supply closet on the second floor, the same one where she had counted chest seals earlier. She shut the door and leaned back against it for a moment, eyes closed. The closet smelled like sterile plastic and gloves. The shelves were white and unforgiving. The fluorescent light buzzed above her steady. Her hands were shaking again. She forced her breathing into the count. 4 in, hold, 4 out. The shaking eased, it did not stop. She opened her eyes and looked at the supplies. Gauze, chest seals, tourniquets, sutures, tools that existed to keep the present from becoming the past. She began to restock not because anything was empty yet, but because her hands needed to do something that made sense. She lined items up by priority, by reach, by survival. The door opened. Dee stood there, one shoulder against the frame, eyes sharp, but not unkind. "You're hiding," Dee said. Claire did not look up. "I'm working." Dee stepped in slowly. "You ran this place today." Claire's fingers kept moving. Someone had to. Dee nodded. "And you did it like you've done it before." Claire's jaw tightened. Dee let the silence sit heavy and patient. Then she spoke softly, like she was offering a truth instead of demanding one. "Whatever you were before, it's still in you. That's not a crime." Claire's hands stopped for a fraction of a second. She stared at the shelf in front of her eyes, focused on nothing. "It feels like one," she said. Dee's gaze stayed on her. "Because of what happened over there." Claire's throat tightened. "Don't." Dee did not move closer. She did not touch. She just stayed. "I'm not asking you to tell me details," Dee said. "I'm asking you not to carry it alone in a place that already knows your hands save lives." Claire swallowed hard. The ER still needed her. The staff still needed orders. The day was not over. There were still families waiting for updates. There were still charts to sign. There were still voices in the hallway that would shift when she walked by. Claire finished the last drawer and shut it gently. When she stepped back into the hallway, the ER noise hit her again, softer now, but layered with something new. Curiosity, suspicion, awe, the kind of attention she had spent 3 years avoiding. She walked back toward the nurse's station. Ethan stood there with his phone in hand, staring at the screen like it had betrayed him. He looked up when he saw her, and the anger on his face was tangled with something else now. Fear, maybe. Or the dawning realization that he had been wrong about her in ways that made him feel small. "We looked you up," he said. Claire's expression did not change. And Ethan continued. "Nothing comes up. No papers, no interviews, no record of anything except the bare minimum. Who are you?" Claire stepped closer, close enough that Ethan had to lower his voice. "I'm someone who works here," she said. "That's not what I meant." Claire held his gaze. "That's what you get." Ethan's jaw flexed. "You can't just hide." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. "Watch me." Dee's voice cut in from behind the station. "That's enough. Ethan turned toward Dee, bristling. This is a problem, Dee. We have someone in our ER with a secret past, and she's taking over like she owns the place. Dee's stare was hard. The only problem I saw today was you almost killing a patient because you were staring at your phone. Ethan's face flushed. Dee did not let him speak. Then you misdrew a dose that would have flattened a stable patient. If Claire hadn't caught it, we'd be writing incident reports instead of cleaning blood off the floor. Silence stretched. Kayla looked down at her clipboard. A tech pretended not to listen. The charge nurse stared at the board like it was suddenly fascinating. Ethan's voice dropped. You're taking her side. Dee's tone stayed even. I'm taking the side of patients who want to leave here alive. Ethan stared at Claire, and for a brief moment, something in his expression cracked a glimpse of shame. Claire did not offer him comfort. She had no extra hands for that. She turned away and began signing charts, her pen moving smoothly, her signature precise. The work was normal. The work was safety. Outside night settled over Savannah, thick and humid. Through the ambulance bay windows, police lights flashed briefly in the distance, blue and red, then faded as vehicles moved on. The ER continued to breathe, continued to take in pain and push out decisions. It did not care about Claire's past. It cared about her hands. Claire stood at the station for a moment, listening to the monitors, the voices, the steady churn. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it at first, then looked down. A hospital system alert, not an email, not a reminder. A real notification from security. Increased police activity reported near the downtown corridor. Staff advised to remain alert. Claire slipped the phone back into her pocket without reacting, but her shoulders tightened slightly the way they had in the supply closet when the lights flickered. Dee noticed. Dee always noticed. Claire kept her face flat and returned to the board scanning rooms, counting staff checking supplies with her eyes, as if inventory could become a shield. The ER doors slid open again, letting in a gust of warm night air and the smell of rain that still had not fallen. The sound of sirens was gone now, replaced by the steady hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet tension that never fully left a place like this. Claire's hands stayed steady on the pen, but her gaze moved to the front entrance for a brief second, as if measuring how easily those doors could become something else. The security alert sat in Claire's pocket like a stone. She did not announce it. She did not look around for reassurance. She just kept doing what she always did when the world hinted it might turn. She checked the board again, counted beds, counted staff, counted supplies with her eyes the way other people counted money. Dee moved through the station with quiet purpose, gathering what needed gathering, resetting what had been burned through during the crane collapse. Kayla stood at the medication cart, restocking syringes with hands that were still slightly unsteady, their breath finally slowing down to something like normal. Ethan stayed near the computer's jaw-tight phone in his hand, as if it could explain why everything in the last few hours had belonged to Claire instead of him. Outside, Savannah's night pressed humid against the glass. Rain threatened, but never committed. The city lights smeared into soft halos in the ambulance bay windows. The ER doors slid open and shut, with the same indifferent rhythm, letting in the occasional gust of warm air and the faint smell of river water. Claire heard the first siren before anyone else reacted. It was distant at first, a thin thread of sound that could have been traffic, could have been ordinary. Then it layered. Another, then another. The pitch climbed, sharpened, overlapped until it stopped sounding like a single emergency and started sounding like a city cracking. Heads lifted at the nurse's station. A tech paused mid-sentence. Dee's eyes narrowed, not in fear, in calculation. The radio crackled, and the tone beneath the voice was different. Not the usual controlled EMS cadence. This one carried adrenaline. All units, active shooter downtown 2 blocks north of Savannah Coast Medical Center. Multiple casualties. Suspect not contained. Police escort inbound with gunshot wounds. For half a second, the ER went still. It was not silence. Monitors still beeped. Ventilation still hummed. But human movement paused, like the building itself held its breath. Then the air changed. People began moving fast, but the movement had a different flavor than the crane collapse. That was accident. This was intent. This was a person who meant to hurt people and might still be close enough to reach them. Someone's voice rose near triage. Should we lock the doors? The charge nurse's hand hovered over the phone again, but now her fingers were trembling. Ethan stepped forward like he wanted to grab the moment back. His voice was a little too loud. "We're a hospital," he said. "We can't just lock people out." Claire's gaze snapped to him. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "Lock secondary entrances," she said. "Move non-critical patients away from glass. Security at every access point. Now." The charge nurse hesitated, eyes flicking from Ethan to Claire, like she was watching two weather systems collide. "Dr. Rowan," she began. Claire looked at her, and the look was not cruel, it was absolute. "Do it," Claire said. Dee moved first. She did not ask for confirmation. She turned and walked briskly toward the side corridor, already calling to security, already instructing staff to close and secure doors that were usually left unlocked for convenience. Kayla swallowed hard and hurried toward the waiting room, raising her voice just enough to be heard without turning into panic. "If you can walk, please follow me," she said. "We're moving everyone to the interior hall for safety." People protested. Someone complained about their place in line. A man with a sprained wrist demanded to know why he should move for anyone else. Kayla did not argue. Two techs stepped in and guided him physically if necessary, a gentle hand at the elbow, a firm one at the shoulder. Claire moved toward the trauma bays, tying her hair back again, her fingers quick and sure. Her body did not act like this was new. It acted like this was a familiar language. Ethan followed, shoulders stiff, trying to keep up while still trying to look like he was leading. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Security will handle it." Claire did not look at him. "Security will handle a door," she said. "We handle the bleeding." The first ambulance arrived with sirens, screaming, police lights flashing behind it like a swarm of electric insects. The ambulance bay doors slammed open, and a wave of cold air from the vehicle's interior hit the warm ER air like a slap. Paramedics rushed in with a man on a gurney, mid-30s, eyes wide, skin pale under sweat. A thick wad of gauze was pressed against his upper chest, but blood leaked around it in dark ribbons. With every breath, a wet, sucking sound came from beneath the dressing. "Gunshot wound to the chest," paramedics shouted. "Sucking chest wound. BP 90/60 and dropping. SATS 87. Trauma 1. Ethan barked, snapping gloves on. His hands were shaking. Not dramatic, but enough. He reached for a chest seal at the cart and fumbled it. The packet slipped from his fingers and hit the floor. Plastic skittered across tile. 2 seconds, maybe 3. The man's SATs dropped to 83. His eyes rolled back for a heartbeat. The sound from his chest grew louder, uglier. Claire shoved past Ethan without apology because apology cost time. She ripped open a new chest seal and pressed it to skin in one smooth motion, sealing the wound like closing a mouth. The sucking sound stopped. The patient gasped, a raw, desperate pull of air that sounded like relief and terror at once. "Intubate him," Claire said. "Now." Ethan grabbed the laryngoscope with a snap of anger, as if speed could make up for the tremor. He got the blade in, but his angle was wrong. He could not see the cords. He adjusted hands, stiff eyes too wide. The monitor alarmed again. Claire watched for half a second, then took the tool from his hands. "Move," she said. Ethan's mouth opened. "You can't just..." Claire placed the blade-lifted saw cords tube in. Fast. Clean. Confirmed with breath sounds. The bag valve mask moved with the patient's chest. Oxygen climbed slow at first, then steadier. Kayla appeared with a chest tube kit as if she had been summoned by instinct. She held it out to Claire with both hands. Claire did not thank her. She did not need to. She just took it. "Scalpel," Claire said. A nurse placed it in her palm. Claire made an incision at the 5th intercostal space. Blunt, dissected with her finger, felt the pleura give way, threaded the tube, clamped, secured. Blood poured into the drainage chamber, dark and fast. 2 units O negative, Claire said. "Type and cross for 4 more. Page surgery." Dee's voice carried from the phone. "Surgery notified. Blood bank sending." Ethan stood at the foot of the bed. Chest, rising, hard eyes fixed on Claire's hands like they were a betrayal. He looked like he wanted to say something, but the room did not have space for his pride. "Next patient," someone shouted. Another gurney crashed through the doors. A young woman, early 20s, eyes glassy blood soaking her shirt near the abdomen. Her skin was gray lips, pale. She was trying to speak, but only a thin sound came out. "Gunshot wound to the abdomen," paramedic said. "Hypotensive. We lost the IV in transit. Trauma 2. Claire said, not asking, not debating. "Bay, 2. Kayla and Dee moved her in. Claire followed, hands already reaching for gloves, her brain dividing the room into tasks, priorities, seconds. Another gurney behind that one. Shrapnel injury from broken glass. A man with a bleeding scalp wound and a wild look in his eyes. A teenager with a bullet crease across his arm that burned more than it bled. Screaming that he didn't do anything. The ER shifted around Claire, the way iron shifts around a magnet. Not because she demanded it, because she was calm, and calm, in a storm, feels like gravity. It did not last. Outside, the deeper rhythmic thump began. Not the light chop of a medical helicopter. This one sounded heavier, lower, more deliberate. The walls seemed to vibrate with it. The staff froze mid-motion for a fraction of a second, heads lifting as if their bodies recognized the sound before their minds did. The main entrance doors opened, not the ambulance bay. The front. 6 men walked in. Their boots struck tile in a steady rhythm, no hurry, no hesitation. Fatigues. Plate carriers. Weapons slung low but visible. Not waved, not hidden, simply present like a fact. The ER's sound dropped, not to silence. Monitors still beeped. The ventilator still hissed. But human voices thinned as if every throat had suddenly gone dry. The lead man was older, maybe mid-50s. Gray beard, weathered face, a posture that filled space without needing to claim it. He scanned the room once, eyes sharp and assessing, then locked on Claire. Claire felt it like a spotlight. Her spine went rigid. "Doc Rowan," the man said. The way he said it was not hospital polite. It was field familiar. It was a name used when seconds mattered more than titles. Claire did not move. Her hands, still gloved, hovered near her sides. "Colonel," she said. Ethan stepped forward, anger and confusion mixing in his face. "This is a hospital," he said. "You can't come in here with weapons." The colonel did not even glance at him. "We need her," he said, eyes still on Claire. Claire's jaw tightened. "I'm out." "No one's ever out," the colonel replied. "Not when a kid's bleeding and the clock is eating him alive." Ethan looked from the colonel to Claire, trying to process the exchange. His voice rose. "You know him." Claire did not answer. The colonel stepped closer, stopping a few feet away, respectful distance, but unyielding presence. He pulled a tablet from his vest and held it out. 12 miles north, he said. Civilian caught in crossfire. 16-year-old. Gunshot wound to the upper chest. Local trauma center doesn't have capability. We need a mobile surgical team. You're in. Claire stared at the tablet without taking it. Her hands clenched inside the gloves. "I told you," she said, voice tight. "I'm out. And I'm telling you, you're recalled." Claire's eyes flashed. Under what authority? The colonel's expression did not change. He turned the tablet slightly so she could see the screen clearly. Department of Defense authorization. Her name, her old designation. Information that had no place in a civilian hospital. Claire Rowan. Captain. Reserve status active. The letters sat on the screen like a weapon. Claire took the tablet and the tremor hit her hands once sharp before she crushed it down with sheer will. "I didn't re-enlist," she said. "You signed delayed recall when you left active duty," the colonel replied. "Automatic in cases of critical need." "This isn't a national emergency," Claire said. "It's a kid." The colonel's voice lowered, and there was something human under the steel. "This is a kid who has minutes. Local facility can't handle a subclavian bleed. We can't get him to a level 1 in time. You are the closest thing we have to a forward surgical team." Claire's breath came faster. The ER felt too bright. Too many eyes. Ethan's face was pale now, his earlier anger dissolving into shock. Dee stood near the nurse's station, watching, not interfering, but her gaze held a quiet steadiness that anchored Claire more than she wanted to admit. Kayla stood near Bay, one hand pressed to a patient's abdomen, her eyes flicking back and forth like she could not decide if this was real. Claire's shoulders tightened. "I can't," she said. "You can?" the colonel replied. His voice stayed low. "I won't order you. I'm asking." Claire's eyes snapped to his. The words landed differently because they were true. An order would have been easier. Orders let you blame the chain of command. Asking meant the choice was hers. "That kid has maybe 20 minutes, the colonel said. "You are the only one who can save him." Claire closed her eyes for a heartbeat. She saw the supply closet shelves, the chest seals lined up, the tremor in her hands. She heard rotor wash in her bones. When she opened her eyes, the mask was back. Thicker. Colder. "I need a full trauma kit," she said. "Surgical capability. And a bird that can handle weight." The colonel nodded once, as if that was what he had been waiting for. "Already outside," he said. Claire turned toward the ER staff. Her gaze found Dee first. "Keep this place running," Claire said. "Lockdown stays in place. Kayla, you hold triage. Do not let Ethan overrule you on meds. If something feels wrong, you stop it and you call Dee." Kayla's eyes widened. Her voice came out thin. "Yes, doctor." Ethan stepped forward, desperate now. "Claire," he said, "you can't just leave during a shift. People are bleeding. This is my hospital." Claire looked at him, and for the first time, Ethan saw the steel underneath her quiet. Not arrogance. Not performance. Something earned. "It's not your hospital," Claire said. "It's your responsibility. Try acting like it." Ethan flinched as if she had struck him. Dee's voice carried from behind. "We've got it, Doc." Claire nodded once. She handed the tablet back to the colonel, then stripped off her gloves, tossed them into the trash, and walked toward the front doors. The operators fell in behind her, moving with disciplined silence. One of them held out a tactical vest. Claire took it and slid her arms through without breaking stride. The weight settled on her shoulders like an old memory. Outside, the helicopter waited on the street rotors, still turning. Black. Unmarked. The kind that did not appear on public schedules. The downwash kicked up grit and paper trash, pushing humid air into a hard wind. Police cars blocked off the area, lights flashing. A handful of people on the sidewalk stared, phones raised, mouths open. Claire climbed in. The door shut. The sound changed immediately. The outside world muffled. The rotors became a constant roar, vibrating through seat and bone. Inside the ER, through the glass, Dee watched the helicopter lift bank north and disappear into the night. Kayla stood frozen, her gloved hands hovering near a patient's chart, eyes wide. Ethan stared at the empty space where Claire had been, his face drained of color. He looked like he was replaying every moment of the last 6 months and seeing it in a new light every time Claire moved too fast, every time she noticed something no one else did, every time she stayed quiet when she could have humiliated him. He was not ready for what the truth did to him. In the helicopter, Claire sat between two operators. The tactical vest pressed against her chest, unfamiliar for 3 years, and yet perfectly known. A trauma kit lay on the bench in front of her, straps clipped tight. Her hands moved without her telling them to. Gloves, gauze, hemostatic dressing, chest tube kit, vascular clamps, sutures, scalpels. Everything laid out by priority, by reach, by what mattered when time was a knife. Muscle memory is cruel that way. It waits patiently until you need it, then it returns like it never left. Across from her, Colonel Hargrove watched, his eyes measuring not her competence, but her breathing, her jaw. The way her fingers pressed just a fraction too hard on the zipper. "You look good, Doc," he said over the roar. Claire did not look up. "Don't. 3 years is a long time," the colonel said. "Most people don't come back clean." Claire's hands paused for a heartbeat, then resumed faster now, almost angry. "I didn't come back clean," she said. The colonel leaned forward slightly. "Kandahar wasn't your fault." Claire's hands stopped. The words hit her like a hand closing around her throat. Not because of the place name, because of what it carried. Her eyes lifted slowly to his. "You don't know what happened," she said. "I read the report," the colonel replied. Claire's laugh came out sharp and humorless. "Reports don't bleed, Colonel." The colonel's expression held steady. Still, his voice softened. 3 men, he said quietly. Claire's jaw clenched. Her gaze dropped back to the kit, as if staring at tools could keep the past from climbing into the cabin. 3 men died on my table, Claire said. Not in a firefight. Not from an explosion. On my table because I couldn't work fast enough. The rotor roar filled the space after her words swallowing everything else. You saved 11, the colonel said. Doesn't matter, Claire replied. Her voice was flat, but the last syllable cracked at the edges. It matters to the 11, the colonel said. It matters to their families, not to the ones who didn't make it, Claire said. Her throat tightened. Not to the names I still carry. She stopped, forced her breath into a count, not moving her lips. 4 in. Hold. 4 out. One of the operators beside her glanced over, then looked away quickly, giving her privacy, without pretending he had not heard. The colonel watched her with something like respect. You came home, he said. Claire's eyes stayed on her hands. I came home because I couldn't carry them anymore. I thought if I worked in a clean ER with real equipment and no mortars, I could forget. Did you? The colonel asked. Claire finally looked up, and the hardness in her eyes was tired, not cruel. No, she said. The colonel nodded slowly as if the answer was what he expected. That's why you're still the best, he said. Claire's mouth tightened. Because I'm broken. Because you remember, the colonel said. Because you care enough that it still hurts. Claire looked away out the small window. Savannah slid past below in a smear of light and shadow. Roads like thin ribbons. Cars like moving sparks. A city full of people who had no idea how close they were to violence, how quickly the night could change. I don't want to go back, Claire said, voice low. You're not going back, the colonel replied. You're moving forward. There's a difference. Claire did not answer. The helicopter began to descend. The sound changed pitch, shifting as the aircraft angled down toward a secured area. Through the window, floodlights cut hard white into the night. Concrete barriers. Armed perimeter. A parking lot that looked like a place built for emergencies that never made the news. The helicopter touched down, skids kissing asphalt. The rotors kept turning, the wind fierce. The door opened. Heat and dust hit Claire's face. She climbed out, crouching under the rotor wash, one hand on the trauma kit, the other steadying herself on the frame. Operators guided her forward. The colonel moved beside her body, angled slightly as if shielding her from the chaos around them. They passed through a checkpoint where armed guards nodded at the colonel and then looked at Claire with a quick, respectful glance that made her stomach knot. Respect felt too much like expectation. They moved through a second checkpoint, then a third. Each one tighter, each one more sealed, until they entered a reinforced building with concrete walls and metal doors. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic and sweat, like someone had tried to make a hospital out of a place never meant to hold suffering. A hallway led to a room that had been converted into a trauma bay. Bright lights, a gurney in the center, medical supplies laid out fast and imperfect. 2 paramedics stood near the bed, faces pale, hands shaking. Their uniforms were streaked with blood. On the table was a boy, 16, skin waxy and too pale, eyes half open, glassy with shock. A thick wad of gauze was packed over his upper chest, just below the clavicle on the left, but blood seeped around it, dark and steady. We can't stop it, one of the paramedics said as Claire entered. His voice broke on the last word. Claire stepped closer. The world narrowed. The boy's breathing was shallow. His pulse thudded fast and weak under the skin of his neck. His lips were tinged blue at the edges. Blood soaked through the gauze, like it was trying to escape faster than hands could hold it. Claire's eyes scanned the wound. Entry point just below the clavicle. No exit visible from this angle. The blood was dark, fast, arterial enough to be terrifying, but not spraying, which meant the vessel might be torn, not fully severed. Subclavian, Claire said almost to herself. The colonel stood in the doorway, watching without stepping in. Claire did not look back. She spoke to the room with the same calm she used in the ER, but here it landed differently. Here, it sounded like a lifeline. I need vascular clamps, she said. 4 proline. 2 units O negative. Now. One of the operators was already pulling supplies from a pack, hands moving with practiced speed. The paramedics looked at Claire like she had walked in carrying oxygen. Claire set the trauma kit on the nearest surface and opened it. Her fingers found gloves. She pulled them on, snapped them tight, and leaned over the boy. His eyes fluttered. For a second, they focused on her face. "Help," he whispered the word, barely audible under the hum of equipment. Claire's voice was low, steady. "I've got you," she said. She reached for the gauze and paused for a fraction of a second. Not from fear, from calculation. Then she began to peel it back, layer by layer, exposing the wound as blood welled up, immediately dark and urgent. The room tightened around that moment, every person holding their breath without realizing it. Claire held pressure with one hand and reached for the scalpel with the other. The metal felt familiar in her palm, colder than the air, heavier than it should have been. She positioned her fingers, felt anatomy under skin, and the count in her head steadied again. Not comfort, not prayer, just control. 4 in, hold, 4 out. Then she made the first cut. The scalpel slid through skin with a clean, controlled pressure. Claire kept her left hand planted over the wound, fingers pressing hard enough to slow the bleeding, without crushing what she needed to save. Blood welled up around her fingertips anyway, warm and slick, trying to outrun her. The boy made a thin sound in his throat. His eyes fluttered, then rolled slightly as if the room was drifting away from him. "Stay with me," Claire said, voice low. One of the paramedics swallowed hard. "We tried packing," he said. "We tried everything." Claire did not look up. "Keep pressure just above the collarbone," she said. "Here. Do not move." The paramedic stepped in where she pointed, hands shaking as he pressed down. Claire felt the tremor through his grip. She steadied him with a short nod, the kind that said, "I know you are scared, and you are still useful." An operator held a light closer. Its beam cut harsh white across the boy's chest, turning blood into something almost black. "Vascular clamps," Claire said. A metal instrument was placed into her palm. Another was laid beside it. A suture packet appeared, then another. 2 units of blood arrived in a cooler, the bags cold and heavy in the medic's hands, as he hung them on a stand that looked like it had been dragged in from a storage room. Claire widened the incision careful and fast, peeling back layers to expose what was trying to kill him. The anatomy was familiar, but it was the kind of familiarity that came with weight. Subclavian injuries were unforgiving. They hid behind bone and muscle, behind structures you could not afford to damage. Blood surged again, quick and insistent. Claire's pulse did not match it. Her breathing stayed controlled. "Suction," she said. A paramedic snapped into motion, the tubing vibrating with the pull. Claire's fingers slipped in blunt dissection, feeling rather than seeing. She found the edge of the torn vessel by touch, the slickness, the slight give. It was not severed. It was ripped, a jagged tear that bled like a mouth that would not close. "Clamp," she said. The first clamp went on above the injury. The bleeding slowed, but it didn't stop. Claire placed the second clamp below, isolating the tear. The room changed instantly. The frantic feeling eased by a fraction because the blood was no longer winning the race. The boy's monitor beeped faster than it should have. His blood pressure began to crawl upward as the transfusion ran. Claire reached for the suture. "Proline. Fine, strong, the kind you trusted with vessels." "Needle driver," she said. Metal met her hand. Her fingers moved without hesitation, aligning the needle, choosing the angle, threading through tissue that did not forgive mistakes. The first pass went clean. The second matched it. She tied with quick certainty, pulling the knot snug but not strangling. She worked in a rhythm that made the room silent. Not because everyone was impressed, because everyone was afraid to interrupt something that looked like the difference between life and death. One of the paramedics whispered, barely audible. "How is she doing that?" The operator beside him did not answer. His eyes stayed on Claire's hands. Claire placed another stitch, then another. The tear closed in increments, the bleeding reducing from a surge to an ooze, then to almost nothing. Her gloves were slick with blood, but her grip never slipped. She adjusted, wiped, once continued. The boy's breathing eased by degrees. His eyes opened a little wider. "Claire," he whispered, voice thin. She leaned in slightly, not breaking her work. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he said, and the word was almost lost. "Marcus," Claire said. "You are doing good. Keep breathing." He nodded once, a tiny motion. She finished the last stitch and paused for a half-second, eyes scanning for any sign of leakage. None. She released the distal clamp slowly. The vessel held. She released the proximal clamp. The repair held. Blood flow restored. Bleeding controlled. The monitor beeped steadier now. The blood pressure climbed into numbers that meant the body still had a chance. The paramedics exhaled like people who had been holding their breath for an hour. Claire closed the skin with quick sutures, then pressed a clean dressing into place. She stepped back, one pace, shoulders tight, as if stepping away from the table might make gravity return all at once. "He needs a real hospital," she said, voice businesslike. "Vascular, follow-up within 24 hours. Transport now." The colonel, still in the doorway, nodded once. "Harborview has a team standing by. He'll be there in 15. Claire's jaw tightened at the name. Harborview was the kind of place that handled the worst. It was also a place where questions traveled fast. Marcus's eyes drifted toward her again. "Thank you," he said. Claire's throat tightened. She did not answer. She stripped her gloves off and tossed them into a bin, hands trembling the moment the barrier was gone. The adrenaline drained like a puncture. Her fingers shook. Her knees felt suddenly less reliable. She walked out of the trauma room into the hallway, boots and voices behind her, muffled. The air outside the room felt cooler, but it did not help. She made it 3 steps, then another 2, and then her legs stopped listening. Claire leaned a hand against the wall, breath coming hard as if she had just run miles. The colonel followed her out. He did not crowd her. He just stepped close enough to be present. "You still got it, Doc," he said. Claire swallowed hard. Her voice came out raw. "He almost died anyway." "He didn't," the colonel replied. Claire pushed off the wall and walked toward the nearest door that led outside. She needed air that was not recycled through concrete. She needed distance from the smell of blood. Outside floodlights made the parking lot look like daylight. Concrete barriers cast sharp shadows. Armed guards stood near the perimeter, faces unreadable. Claire stepped to the curb and sat down, hard elbows on knees, head bowed. Her hands shook in her lap. The colonel sat beside her, far enough that she could breathe, close enough that she was not alone. "You should come back," he said finally. Claire shook her head without looking up. "I can't do it anymore." "You just did." Claire's laugh was thin, almost bitter. "That was one kid, one wound, one moment. I can't lose another team, Colonel. I can't watch people I care about die because I wasn't fast enough or smart enough or good enough." The colonel was quiet for a beat. Then he spoke softly, the way you speak when you are choosing your words carefully. "You are not the reason they died." Claire's hands clenched into fists. "That is what they said last time." Silence sat between them. The rotor wash from the helicopter still thumped in the distance, steady and inescapable. The colonel looked at her, not demanding, not pitying. "You know why I came for you tonight," he said. Claire did not answer. "Because when I asked who the best trauma doc in Savannah was, 5 different people said your name," he continued. "None of them knew what you were before. You earned that respect twice. Once in uniform, once out of it." Claire stared at the concrete. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I just want to save people without seeing their faces every time I close my eyes." The colonel's gaze stayed on her profile. "You will," he said. Claire's breath hitched once. She did not respond. She did not believe in promises like that. A medic stepped outside and approached carefully. "Sir, transport is ready," he said. The colonel nodded and stood. He offered Claire a hand. She stared at it for a moment, then took it. His grip was firm, steady, not dragging her, just helping her up. "We'll fly you back," he said. Claire shook her head. "I'll take a car." The colonel's brows lifted slightly. Claire's voice stayed flat. "I need the time." He studied her for a beat, then nodded. "All right. A vehicle will be waiting." He placed a hand on her shoulder, light but grounding. "You did good tonight, Captain." Claire's jaw tightened. "I'm not a captain anymore." The colonel's expression did not change. "You'll always be a captain to the people who lived because of you," he said. Claire stepped away before she could respond. A black SUV waited near the perimeter. The driver opened the door without speaking. Claire slid into the back seat, the leather cold against her skin. When the door shut, the outside noise muffled, and for a moment, there was only the sound of her breathing and the distant echo of rotors fading. She stared at her hands. Clean now, wiped with antiseptic, but she could still feel Marcus's blood under her nails like a ghost. She pulled her phone out, thumb hovering over the screen. Her contacts loaded. Names slid past. Her thumb stopped on a contact she had not looked at in 3 years. A woman's name. A surname she recognized too well. She stared at it until her eyes blurred. She did not call. She could not. Not yet. She locked the phone and leaned her head against the window. The city slid past in silence. Streetlights flickered across her face like frames of a film she did not want to watch. Somewhere downtown, police lights flashed. Somewhere else, people screamed. Somewhere else, someone was sleeping and did not know how close the night had come to taking everything. Claire's eyes burned. She blinked hard once, then again. By the time she reached Savannah Coast Medical Center, the clock on the dash read 2:04 a.m. The hospital looked the same from the outside. Glass and light. Automatic doors sliding open and shut. The same promise of safety that was only half true. Inside, the night shift was quiet, but awake. The waiting room had fewer people now, but the air was tense. Staff moved like they were trying not to startle something. Dee Parker stood at the nurse's station, arms crossed, posture steady. Kayla hovered near the supply closet, pretending to organize something that did not need organizing. Ethan sat in the physician lounge, staring at his phone, his coffee long gone cold. They all turned when the doors opened. Claire stepped in wearing scrubs and a tired face. Her hair was pulled back. Her posture was controlled. But she moved differently now. Not lighter, not heavier, just less hidden. Dee spoke first. "You're back." Claire nodded once and set her bag down on the counter. "How's the kid?" Dee's eyes softened by a fraction. "Stable. En route to Harborview. He's going to make it." Claire swallowed hard. "Good." Dee studied her. "And you?" Claire's mouth tightened. "I don't know yet." Kayla stepped closer, voice hesitant. "We tried to keep things running like you said," she began. Dee cut her off gently. "Kayla did fine." Kayla's eyes flicked to Claire. "We locked down. We moved people away from windows. Security stayed at the doors. Ethan actually listened when I told him a dose was wrong." Ethan flinched at the mention of his name. He stood in the doorway of the lounge now, arms crossed, face hard. Claire looked at him, expression unreadable. Dee's voice carried again, calm but direct. "We Googled you while you were gone." Claire's jaw clenched. She did not respond. Dee continued, not accusatory, just stating fact. Nothing came up, but that man from earlier, Luke Carver, he came back. He waited 3 hours to talk to anyone who would listen. Claire's chest tightened. "Why?" "Because he wanted us to know who you are," Dee said. "He wanted it on record, like it mattered more than your privacy." Claire closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked at Dee. Dee did not look away. "Captain Claire Reeves," Dee said quietly. The name landed in the nurse's station like a dropped instrument. Not loud, not subtle either. Claire's hands curled into fists at her sides. "That's not who I am anymore," she said. Ethan stepped forward, voice sharp. "Then why did you go tonight?" Claire turned to him slowly. "Because they made me." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "No. You went because you're still her. You've been her the whole time." Claire's breathing tightened for a moment. She felt the old instinct to deny, to shut it down, to walk away. But the room was watching. Dee, Kayla. A respiratory therapist leaning in the hallway. A tech pretending to wipe down the counter. Everyone hungry for the story, for the label that would make Claire make sense to them. Claire looked at Ethan, and something in her expression cracked, not weakness, exhaustion. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Then tell me," Ethan replied, stepping closer. "Tell me why you organize supplies like you're prepping for war. Why you scan every room like it's hostile. Why you move like someone who's been shot at." Claire felt the words pushing up from her chest like bile. She swallowed once. It did not go back down. "Because I have been," she said. The room went still. Claire's voice shook, but it did not break. I've been shot at. I've been blown up. I've done chest tubes in the back of a helicopter with no power and no blood to give. I've held people together with my bare hands while they bled out because we ran out of gauze. Kayla's eyes filled. Dee's face stayed steady, but her jaw tightened. Claire's breath hitched. I've lost count of how many people died on my table, she continued. How many faces I still see when I close my eyes. How many names I carry that no one else remembers. Her voice dropped lower. So yes, I move like that. I think like that because that's who I was. And no matter how hard I try to be someone else, I can't stop being her. Silence. Even the monitors sounded quieter, as if the building itself was listening. Dee stepped forward. Why didn't you tell us? Claire's shoulders sagged a fraction. The anger drained out of her like blood leaving a wound, leaving exhaustion behind. Because I wanted to be normal, she said. I wanted to be just a doctor. Not the veteran, not the hero, not the one everyone looks at differently. She swallowed hard. Just someone who helps people without carrying ghosts. Ethan's voice softened, and it sounded unfamiliar on him. You are that person. Claire shook her head once. No. I'm the person you didn't trust. The one you gave coffee duty to. The one you assumed was too damaged to handle a full patient load. Ethan looked down, and for the first time, his arrogance had nowhere to stand. His voice came out rough. I'm sorry. Claire's eyes stayed on him. You should be. Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. I was wrong. We all were. You're the best doctor in this ER, and I was too proud and too stupid to see it. Claire studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, small. Yeah, you were. She picked up her bag. Claire D. began. Claire turned her head slightly. If you're going to know the truth, she said, voice quiet. Use the rank I earned when you speak about the part of me you didn't bother to see. Dee's eyes held hers. Understood, Captain D said. Claire nodded once and walked toward the locker room. She sat on the bench bag beside her, breathing hard now that the mask had dropped. Her hands shook again, but this time she did not fight it as viciously. She let the shaking happen. Let it pass. A knock came at the door. Soft. Claire looked up. Dee stood there. The way you handled tonight, Dee said we need to talk to admin before someone else does. Claire's mouth tightened. I know. 2 days later, Claire sat in a chair across from Harold Lasky, the hospital administrator. He wore a suit that looked too expensive for the fluorescent world of the ER, silver hair combed neatly, eyes tired in a way that suggested he lived under constant pressure to prevent lawsuits. He did not waste time. The Department of Defense called, he said. Claire's stomach tightened. She kept her face neutral. They told us who you are and what you've done. Lasky continued. They also made it clear we have been underutilizing one of the most highly trained trauma physicians in this region. He slid a folder across the desk. We are offering you a new position. Director of Trauma Services. Authority over protocols, staffing recommendations, and training. Compensation commensurate with your experience. Claire stared at the folder like it might explode. Why now? Lasky leaned forward slightly. Because we watched the security footage from the crane collapse. We interviewed staff. We reviewed outcomes. And we realized something that should have been obvious. He tapped the folder with one finger. You have been doing the impossible quietly for months while people treated you like a problem to manage. I'm done managing you. I want you leading. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she opened the folder. The title stared back at her in black print. It looked unreal in a way that made her suspicious. Director of Trauma Services. She read the contract without blinking. Terms, responsibilities, training budget, reporting structure. Lasky watched her. You don't have to hide anymore, he said. Claire lifted her gaze. Her voice came out steady. I'm not hiding, I'm surviving. Lasky's eyes held hers. Then let's build something that makes survival less lonely, he said. Claire looked back down at the contract. Her fingers tightened around the pen. She signed. That afternoon, Dee found her in the supply closet again. Claire was restocking as always, but her movements were slower now, more deliberate. Not because she was tired, because she could finally breathe enough to choose pace. You okay? Dee asked. Claire glanced over. Yeah. Dee leaned against the doorframe. Marcus woke up this morning, Dee said. Asked about the doctor who worked on him. His mom wants to meet you. Claire's throat tightened. Tell him I'm glad he made it. I did, Dee said. His mom still wants to say thank you. Claire stared at the supplies on the shelf. The chest seals. The tourniquets. Tools that kept the present from becoming the past. Okay, she said finally. Dee's mouth curved into a small smile. Also, Ethan wants to apologize officially in front of everyone. Claire's gaze sharpened. He already did. He wants to do it again, Dee said. He says he needs it. Claire closed a drawer gently. He doesn't need to humiliate himself. Dee shrugged. He says he does. Claire was quiet for a beat, then nodded once. Tell him we're good. Tell him to be better. That's all. Dee nodded. 6 months passed, and the ER looked the same to anyone who didn't know what to look for. The walls were still white. The lights still buzzed. The floors still carried faint stains that never fully disappeared. But the rhythm changed. In a conference room near the trauma bays, Claire stood at a whiteboard, leading a simulation. 12 residents sat in front of her notebooks, open eyes fixed. Dee sat near the back, arms crossed, watching like a guardian. Kayla sat beside her, older in the eyes, now steadier in the hands. Ethan was there too. He stood against the wall, not pretending he was the smartest person in the room anymore, just absorbing. Tension pneumothorax, Claire said, tapping the board with a marker. Your patient is crashing. Sightats dropping. Blood pressure falling. You have 90 seconds. The residents moved to the simulation mannequin. One called for a needle. Another prepped a chest tube kit. A third managed airway. They spoke in short, clear phrases. Closed loop. Confirmations. No wasted noise. Claire watched, arms folded, face calm. When the timer beeped, she nodded once. Good, she said, again. One resident raised a hand, hesitating. Dr. Reeves. Is it true you did this in combat? Claire paused. The room went quiet, waiting to see if she would shut down. She did not. Yes, she said. What was it like? The resident asked. Claire set the marker down. She looked at the group, not at any one person. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, she said. And the most important. A resident swallowed. Even when people were dying. Especially then, Claire replied. Panic kills. Hesitation kills. The moment you freeze, someone else pays for it. So you breathe, you act. And you do not give up until there is nothing left to try. Ethan watched from the back, expression unreadable. When the session ended, he approached her. That was good, he said. Claire nodded. Thanks. You're a better teacher than I ever was, Ethan said. Claire met his eyes. You're doing fine, she said. You're doing better because you chose to change. Ethan's throat tightened. I wanted to say it again, he said. You changed the way I practice medicine. Claire held his gaze for a beat, then nodded once. Good. Later, in her small office overlooking the ambulance bay, Claire sat at her desk. A window framed the bay doors, the place where chaos entered like weather. On the wall hung a photo of the trauma team after a night with 0 deaths, their smiles tired but real. On her desk sat a handwritten letter. She picked it up and read it again, slow. Dear Dr. Reeves, I'm alive because you didn't give up. My mom says you saved me when no one else could. I don't remember much, but I remember your voice. Calm, like everything was going to be okay. Thank you for giving me a future. Marcus. Claire set the letter down carefully. Beside it sat the battered notebook. She opened it. Names, dates, places. The ink looked darker than it should have, as if grief could stain paper. Her finger traced one name, then another. She turned to a blank page at the back. She picked up a pen. Marcus Delgado, 16 years old. GSW, upper chest. Subclavian artery repair. Survived. She underlined the last word once firmly. Then she closed the notebook and set it in the desk drawer, not thrown away, not erased, just placed down where it could stop living in her hands all the time. A knock sounded. Dee stepped in. County General's trauma director is here, Dee said. Wants to talk about your protocols. Claire lifted an eyebrow. Poaching. Dee's grin was quick. They want your help redesigning their program. They asked for you by name. Claire exhaled slowly. Tell them I'll meet with them next week. Dee paused at the door. You know you're allowed to be proud of this, right? Claire looked down at the letter again. I'm just doing my job, she said. Dee's eyes softened. No, she replied. You're building something that keeps people alive after you leave the room. Dee left. Claire sat for a moment listening to the ER through the walls. Monitors, voices, the soft rumble of gurneys, the constant heartbeat of the place. That night, she stood outside the ER entrance under the awning, the air cool enough to take the edge off the humid day. Savannah's downtown lights glowed as I lowed in the distance. The street was quiet in a way that felt temporary. Claire pulled out her phone and scrolled to a number she had not called in months. It rang twice. Doc Rowan, Colonel Hargrove's voice came through steady as ever. Claire swallowed. Yeah, she said. Silence sat between them for a beat. Didn't think I'd hear from you again, he said. I didn't think I'd call, Claire replied. You doing okay? Claire looked back through the glass doors at the ER. Staff moving with purpose. Residents quieter, sharper. Dee at the station watching everything. Kayla teaching a new nurse how to prime a line. Claire's voice came out softer. I think I am. Good, the colonel said. I'm not coming back, Claire said. I know, he replied. But I'm not running anymore either, Claire said. The colonel's voice warmed by a fraction. I know that too. Claire's mouth tightened into something like a small smile. Thanks for that night, she said. You earned it, Doc, he replied. You earned all of it. She ended the call and stood there for another moment breathing. Then she walked back inside. The ER was busy. A new patient arrived at triage. The waiting room murmured. The trauma bay doors swung open and shut as staff moved with quiet urgency. A young resident approached her near the station, uncertainty in his face. Dr. Reeves, he said. I have a question about chest tube placement. Claire did not hesitate. She turned toward him, marker in hand, eyes steady. Show me your landmarks, she said. The resident nodded, relieved, and pulled up a diagram on his tablet. Claire leaned in, voice calm, precise, patient. Her hands did not shake. And when the front doors slid open again and the night air drifted in, she did not look at them like a threat. She looked at them like what they were, an entrance, another patient, another chance to do the work.